first dog was a black lab. His name was Bear. As a child on the farm, Bear followed me everywhere. Hung out with us wherever we were as kids. As we played, he seemed to just watch over us. Bear lived probably 10 or 12 years with us. He was my best friend. That's the thing about dogs. No amount of time can erase the memory of a dog that you've loved. As a dog trainer, I've had the privilege to own and work with many dogs, including Diesel, a fun-loving German Shepherd that came to me in an unusual way. I'm John Gardner, and this is my story of how my love for dogs saved my life. I've had Diesel for a number of years. It's a very interesting story how I received Diesel. A lady calls me and tries to give me a dog over the phone. Immediately I just say, no, I don't want a dog, don't need a dog, I've got one. She was very insistent and called multiple times. After probably the fourth time, my wife and I decided we'll go look at the dog, but we told her we probably won't take him. So we went, and this beautiful German Shepherd come running around and met me at the front door. And I was like, hey, that's a nice dog. She walked around, hey, how you doing? Introduced herself. We started talking, and then I said, which dog are you talking about rehoming? And she pointed to this one. And I was like, really? And I said, ma'am, I can't afford your dog. I said, this dog's just too expensive. He was titled, he's from Germany, imported. And she said, well, if you'll give him a good home, you can have him. I was overwhelmed. My wife looked at me and smiled, and I'm like, fine, we'll give him a great home. He's been a part of our family now, and we go almost everywhere together. We have a great time together. I grew up on a small farm in North Carolina. I had 4 sisters and a brother. My grandmother also lived with us. There was a large family, small farm. We worked out in the fields, worked in the gardens. I had lots of farm animals, including dogs. They were part of our family, and I bonded with them. That's where I learned about my love for animals, especially dogs. Beekeeping is another hobby of mine. It taught me about risk, reward, patience, and hard work. Making things with my own hands, we had to do that a lot at the farm. We wouldn't pay people to come into our house to fix things, we would do it. My dad taught me that as a young boy. Working in the wood shop, working with tools, not afraid of making a mistake. Just doing it, and if it didn't work, tear it apart and then do it again. These lessons carried with me through my dog training years. I've been a police officer since 1991. At the police academy, I was introduced to police dogs for one of the special operations trainings. When I heard it was going to be a police dog, I went down and sat on the front row of the bleachers so I could have a good view of what was going to happen. And they asked for a volunteer. I raised my hand very quickly, said I would love to be a volunteer. They gave me a sleeve and told me what to do, and I was bit by a police dog for the very first time. And I came back to my bench. I said to the guy next to me, I know what I'm going to do when I grow up. A few months later, when I get back to the sheriff's office, I finished my field training. My sergeant called me into his office and said, we need to talk. He says, we need to find out what you want to be when you grow up here at the sheriff's office. I was like, well, that's easy. I want to be a police dog handler. He said, no, that's not going to happen. Pick something else. So I said, but that's what I want to do. I really want to be a police dog handler. Pick something else, he said. So I said, sure, I'll be an investigator. He said, okay, fine, great. He signed off on it and shut the book and dismissed me out of his office. And I left thinking, one day I'll be a police dog handler here. For 2 years, I continued to be a deputy sheriff, but my heart still wanted to be a police dog handler.
We had been married 5 or 6 years, and I knew John still talked all the time about wanting to be a police dog handler. And, that desire that he'd had never went away.
I studied, I read books, I talked to people, I went and watched other dogs train. My wife and I sat down and finally decided we'll buy our own dog.
We went to North Carolina to pick up this puppy that we had saved for. I remember getting out of the car and these little puppies running around, and I just remember sitting down on the ground and being surrounded by 8 or 10 puppies and just loving every bit of it. And picking out the cutest little fur ball, and we named him Miko. I remember when we got home, we got him out of the car and there was a little tennis ball laying on the ground. He went and picked it up, and the ball was almost bigger than he was. He could hardly get his mouth around it. He carried that thing everywhere. We were excited because we thought, that's a good sign. He has a lot of prey drive, which is what you want for a police dog. For the first year and a half or so, he was just our pet. We had to wait till he was a little bit older to start some of the police dog training.
I had a friend of mine who was an excellent trainer, retired from Washington, D.C., who took me on and let me intern underneath him.
Well, when John brought the dog for me to look at, I think it wasn't a strong candidate, but it had some obvious qualities. The one plus was John was willing to work with any inadequacies that the dog had. He was bound and determined to get this off the ground. That had a big emphasis for me to work with him longer and not pull the plug and say, this is not a good candidate. In dog training, when you have bad days, a lot of good stuff comes out of that. How did we overcome that? How did we not just give up? How did we use the things that the dog had as a weakness, and we learned about it and made it a strength?
Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. And so you just change it up, find out how you can communicate better to that dog. It's not a big science. It's just knowing how to communicate to the animal, and he can communicate back to me. I know what he's thinking, and he knows what I'm thinking. That was the key.
Eventually, after his training was over, he was ready for certification. We found a place that would certify him, and John was very nervous, but we took him there, and Miko passed, and he was ready to work.
So I had a nationally certified police dog, but had nowhere to work him. It's been 4.5 years since the conversation I had with my sergeant, who told me it will not happen. So I go to the sheriff and say, I've got this nationally certified dog ready to go to work for you for free. He said, it's a German Shepherd? I don't want it. I'm like, really? He says, no, I don't want it. And I left very disappointed, worried that I had wasted all of my time, my dreams, my money. But then the next week, the sergeant over the narcotics unit called and says, hey, do you have one of those drug finding dogs? He didn't know what to call it. And I said, yes, I do. He said, well, I need one of those tonight for a search warrant. Can you bring your dog there? I said, he's nationally certified, sir. He's ready to go.
And I remember John coming in the house. I was like, what are you doing home right now? You're supposed to be at work. He goes, I came to get Miko. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, they're going to use him. They're finally going to use him.
We went out, did the search warrant with the narcotics unit and SWAT team, and it was a good search warrant for a dog. He found some hidden things that they wouldn't have found without a dog present. And he took that back to the sheriff and says, hey, we couldn't have done this without a dog. And it was that dog. He says, well, let's use him.
That night, John's career as a police dog handler finally began.
When the sheriff said we can use him part-time, I was ecstatic. I said, absolutely. We'll do it part-time, because I knew it was going to turn into a full-time position eventually, because that dog was going to do some amazing things. One of the hardest things law enforcement dogs do, in my opinion, is tracking. They're tracking human scent is one thing that they're tracking. And so you're thinking of dead skin cells that fall off your body as you're walking, that drop onto the ground. And the dog tracks human scent. You can't see it. You can't feel it. It's so microscopic. To me, it's amazing a dog could track that. The second thing that they do is they look for ground disturbance. The dog is tracking vegetation that has been stepped on. Vegetation that has been stepped on smells differently than the ground that has not been stepped on. So we start with a dog about a year old, and we get their head on the ground. How do we get their nose on the ground? A lot of times I'll take a can of cat food, smelly cat food, and I put it in a sock, and I'll step on it, and I'll put it on the end of a leash, and I'll drag it. So I'm not actually leaving anything on the ground, but I'm leaving a lot of odor on the ground. It's in usually thick grass. I'm making steps, and I'm just trying to get their nose on the ground. And at the very end, I give them a reward. There's their favorite toy at the end. After they finish the first phase, we'll go into a second phase where we will actually skip drag, or we'll drag it, the cat food, we'll pick it up, we'll walk for a little ways, we'll drag it again for a little ways. We're taking away some of that. But the human scent is constant, and we leave that there. And eventually, in the third phase, we take the food odor away completely. The only thing that is left is the human scent and the ground disturbance. When you have those two things only with a reward at the end, the dog figures it out. We start with easy things, tall grass, wet grass, foggy mornings. Moisture helps hold the odor there. And then we start making it harder with turns, crossing creeks, pavement, gravel. We add obstacles to the track. And it's all a game. It's fun for the dog. There's no work to it. It is a joy for the dog to come out and put a harness on, because they know they're about to do a game of hide and seek to find the reward at the end. My second police dog was a German Shepherd named Nick. He was a black German Shepherd, beautiful dog. He was a dual-purpose dog, patrol, narcotics, tracking, article searches, and building searches. I worked with a deputy named Drew for a couple of years. He was a friend of mine. One night, he was on a call, got out with a suspicious person, found out he had active warrants. And during the arrest, the suspect broke away from him and took off running. Drew pursued him. It ended up, at the very end of that, the suspect actually shot and killed Drew and took his pistol.
I heard the doorbell ring and I thought it was probably Drew. I didn't think it would be anyone else. I came downstairs and I saw the two chaplains along with my parents, and even then I still didn't think anything was wrong. I opened the door and I remember my parents immediately coming on either side of me. The chaplain said, "Bryce, we are here to let you know that Drew was in an accident at work and he did not make it and he has passed away." I just remember screaming, "Jesus, help me." And I remember dropping to the floor, and then everything was a blur.
Everybody who was available responded to help find the suspect who killed my friend.
We were out, and John came up to me and said, "I've got to go. I've got to get Nick. There's been an officer shot and killed, and the bad guy's got his gun. So I have to go." Most of the time, I didn't know what John was into until after the fact, and that was okay with me. I knew it was a dangerous job, but I didn't worry about him as long as I didn't know what was going on during. But this time I knew.
We were out all night. The weather was terrible, thunderstorms, it was pouring down rain. The helicopters couldn't fly. We were setting up a big perimeter of police cars and officers all around that area to try to hold this bad guy into one position. I received information that the suspect had been seen walking close to where I was at. So I responded immediately.
I knew that this night was going to be really dangerous for John because John was with Nick. Nick was leading the search and John was right behind him. I knew that he was going to be the very first person who was going to come in contact with this bad guy. He didn't have any problem with shooting a police officer. So it was a long night.
We found a bandana, had blood on it. We found a hat. So I knew that we were on a track. And as we were tracking, my dog stopped and spun around and came back toward me and dove into a bush. And then I heard growling. He'd found the guy who killed Drew. And as soon as Nick engaged with the suspect, I heard a shot fired. So I went down, pulled him out. My cover team was trying to protect me during this time, returning fire. I walked back to my car with my dog, and we get back there. I'm at the trunk. I'm checking him for his injury. I'm trying to find where his injury is at. I know he's been shot. And I find that it's only a graze. It burned the fur on his chest and grazed him across the shoulder. And I thought, that dog just took a bullet that was meant for me. It was amazing.
The morning of the funeral, I was blown away by everything that I saw. They had a 21 gun salute, a flyover. There were officers from all over the country that came to support our family and everyone who is involved in the situation surrounding Drew's death. I remember being in the limousine, looking out the window, and I saw 2 police dogs with their handlers. I remember telling my friend who was with me, "That's Nick. That's the dog that found Drew's killer." We got out of the limo. I got down on my knees and was petting Nick, just like I would my own dog, right up in his face. I remember being so overwhelmed with gratitude for their willingness to risk their lives to bring Drew's killer to justice.
I was grateful to have a front row seat watching Nick give everything he had to serve, protect, and comfort those he met. Nick was an extraordinary dog.
Carry the weight of the world on your shoulders.